Ontario Premier Doug Ford retaliates against the U.S. tariffs with his province's electricity. Meanwhile, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith in Texas rubbing elbows with America's top energy figureheads. And an election could be called very, very soon, as early as this weekend. Here to discuss it all is federal political commentator Brian Lilley of the Toronto Sun. Brian, welcome back. Great to have you with us.
Thanks for having me. There's not much going on in politics these
No.
days. I'm not sure what we're going to
We
discuss.
have nothing to talk about here, absolutely. Okay, so Brian, Donald Trump, it's strange that we would start with him, but Donald Trump has noticed the moves from Ontario Premier Doug Ford to retaliate against American tariffs. So Trump is now promising to impose 50% tariffs on aluminum and steel, hitting companies like Atlas Steel in Edmonton. So Brian, it seems like we are at the start of an all-out trade war here.
Yeah, and it's important for Canadians to remember that it was not Doug Ford that started this. It was nobody in Canada that started this. It was Donald Trump. He imposed the tariffs last week. He paused some, but not all of them, threatened to bring in more tariffs, perhaps today on lumber and dairy. And of course, tomorrow, more tariffs on steel and aluminum. Now it's going to be 50% instead of 25%. Why? Because Ontario said there's two moves that Ontario has made. And of course, being a provincial government, they are not able to impose tariffs, but they did make two moves that have caught the attention of the Americans. One, they removed all American alcohol products from the Liquor Control Board of Ontario. It's not only the retailer, it's the wholesaler for every bar and restaurant that serves alcohol in the province, which makes it either one of the biggest or the biggest purchaser of beverage alcohol in the world. More than $1 billion of U.S. products, 3,600 different brands that are distributed, and so that's a major move. But then Ontario also provides electricity to about 1.5 million homes in Minnesota, Michigan, and New York State. And Doug Ford said, you know what, this guy, Trump, is not going to back down on his tariffs. He's still threatening us. And so we're going to put a 25% surcharge. It's kind of an export tariff on electricity going to the United States. Still doesn't make it unaffordable for the Americans to buy our electricity, but he is saying that he will ramp up if need be and will ultimately consider cutting the power off if Trump continues to push forward with tariffs. This is one of the only things, Jeanette, that has broken through. Last week, when Ford was threatening this, you suddenly started seeing American conservative and Republican commentators pausing and saying, oh, wow, this is serious. This is something big. But it was late last night that Donald Trump responded on Truth Social. So I'm going to read off my phone. Hopefully you guys can put this up on screen. And Trump laid out what he's going to do. He said, based on Ontario, Canada placing a 25% tariff on electricity coming into the United States, I have instructed my Secretary of Commerce to add an additional 25% tariff to 50% on all steel and aluminum coming into the United States from Canada, one of the highest tariffing nations anywhere in the world. He goes on ranting for quite a bit, saying that we subsidize Canada, and we shouldn't be doing that, and that Canada should be part of the United States. Later on Tuesday, did another post saying, why would we ever allow another country to provide our electricity, and we have to change this? So look, Trump doesn't realize how integrated our economies have been going back more than a century, and he is just furious that anyone is standing up to him. And I know some Canadians think that this is a dumb move, but with Donald Trump, if you respond with weakness, you get another beating.
Yeah.
And it also turns out that if you respond with strength, he's going to threaten another beating. But at least he's acknowledging something is happening here and is looking to, I don't know, hopefully maybe find a way out. That's what we've got to hope for. But doing nothing was not an option. Unfortunately, we don't have great federal leadership at the moment, but this has definitely caught the attention of the White House. Doug Ford doing nonstop media in the United States for the past couple of days, and tonight will be on Hannity on Fox News, one of Donald Trump's favorite shows, making Canada's case.
Yeah, interesting. Doesn't he have a little bit of a point though in terms of Canada being one of the highest tariffed? I mean, don't they tariff the United States for a lot of produce and
Well,
whatnot?
we
I
both
mean,
have tariffs on each other, and
yeah,
we've got a negotiated trade deal.
it's in the
And
hundreds of percentages though.
but well, the 250 to 300% tariff on dairy is only if they go over their quota, which they never do. Now, there are issues with that on how we hand out the quotas and how we block American access, but we do not charge them 250 to 300% tariffs on American dairy because they never get to that point in sales. We each have issues with each other. If you want to renegotiate the Canada, US, Mexico trade agreement, let's do that. Don't sit there like a chimpanzee with a machine gun shooting at anything that catches your attention and saying, we've got to tariff it. We've got the trade deal. Let's renegotiate the trade deal that he once called the greatest trade deal ever when he renegotiated it. So let's get back to that.
Exactly. I can't help wonder, Brian, those business owners, the restaurant owners, the liquor store owners, and whatnot, how they feel about having to remove the booze that they've already purchased. Now, won't they be taking a loss on this?
So the bars and restaurants can keep selling what they
Hmm.
have in
Yeah,
stock, and the liquor stores, those are owned by the government. So that's the government taking a loss on this.
there you
Some of
go.
it has already been paid for. Some of it is sold on consignment, so it hasn't been paid for. But let me tell you, the governor of Kentucky has been on the phone with both Ford and the White House nonstop. Senator Rand Paul, who is still aligned with the Trump administration, has been speaking up against this, not against Ford, but against the tariffs. Mitch McConnell has been as well, but Mitch McConnell doesn't matter to Donald Trump because Trump hates Mitch McConnell. But Rand Paul, he's still on board. Every person that represents Kentucky in Congress is speaking up and saying, you got to stop these tariffs. It's hurting our bourbon business. The owner of Jack Daniels speaking out against this. So, look, we haven't had much breakthrough in terms of Canada's response in the United States. These two measures by Ontario alone, again, in the middle of a leadership vacuum in Ottawa, these two measures have broken through.
Right. Okay, we'll move on now to Alberta Premier Danielle Smith. So she is in Houston, Texas for CERA Week, CERA Week, which is a major international energy conference. So she's speaking to the summit that includes Doug Burgum, the Interior Secretary in the Trump administration, and Energy Secretary Chris Wright. But people are criticizing Premier Smith for this move, Brian.
Yeah, some people are saying, "Oh, why are you down there? Why are you talking to our enemies?" If you're not talking to the people who are in the administration or close to the administration or the CEOs that can influence the administration to try and get tariffs lifted, well, what are you doing? I mean, you just want them to sit at home and do nothing? Look, I support both the moves that Ontario Premier Doug Ford has taken and the moves that Alberta Premier Danielle Smith and Scott Moe's down there, by the way, Saskatchewan's
Mhm.
premier, they're all trying in their own ways to find a way to get us out of this situation. And if going to Houston, and by the way, this is not an American energy conference, this is a global energy conference that happens to be in Houston because it's the center of the international oil industry. And so, of course, they have to be there. And so, yeah, you go down, you give a keynote address, you try and make sure that you run into Burgum in the hall or you run into Wright in the hall, you try and set up a meeting, you talk to the CEOs and you say, look, uh, you know, uh, President and CEO of United Airlines, I know this is going to cost you more money. You know who you should call? There's this guy you should call. His name's Donald Trump, and you try and make the case for Canada. Absolutely, they should be down there doing this. Just like they've both gone to Washington a couple of times. I believe the premier should be in Washington more often. Again, complete lack of federal leadership at the moment, and we may not have federal leadership for months to come. The premiers need to step up. Danielle Smith is doing that. Anyone that's criticizing her is a reactionary person who just wants to go to war with the United States. as much as some people will say Doug Ford started this war with the United States over the electricity thing, one, he didn't, in response to Trump tariffs. But Ford keeps saying, I don't want to do this. I want to do more business with you. Let's stop the trade wars. It's the same sort of thing. Danielle Smith is making the same message. We want to stop the trade wars. We want to get things back to normal. This is not good for you. This is not good for the American public, the American consumer, the American economy.
Yeah. So here we are talking a lot about what the premiers are doing to deal with Trump and his tariff threats. But shouldn't it be the job of the federal government to do all this?
Yes, it should be, but who's in charge right now?
Yeah,
Is it Justin
exactly.
Trudeau, who's on his way out and who couldn't get his phone calls returned by Donald Trump? Well, probably not. Is it Mark Carney, who isn't sworn in yet as prime minister and who has not been elected by the general public? What do you think is going to happen
Yeah.
if Mark Carney at this point tries to reach out to the Trump White House? They'll
Yeah.
laugh.
Yeah.
They will not take his calls, even after he's sworn in. He has no mandate. He's not going to, exude any confidence in the Trump administration. This is a guy who was actually called before Congress while he was chair of Brookfield Asset Management, his former job, because the American House of Representatives believed that Brookfield Asset Management was running a green cartel. Why? Because they were pushing for net zero financing. The net zero financing alliance that Carney was the head of, that tried to say, if you are looking for financing for an oil project, for a natural gas project, for a pipeline project, banks should turn you down because there is a climate risk with this, and we need to ensure that there is zero climate risk, and we need to get to net zero. The House of Representatives called him in for serious questioning over this. Trump's going to know that. The Republican leadership is going to know that. And Mark Carney is not going to get his phone calls returned either.
Oh, wow. And of course, as we know, the Liberals chose him to be their new leader. And like you said before, he doesn't have a mandate from the public. So do you think that Carney, will be effective? Obviously, you're just kind of answering that right there, that he's not going to be at all effective in dealing
Yeah.
with Trump. Not even
No,
if he gets sworn in, do you think?
no, this is why we need an election, and we need one now.
Yeah. So what does that
There,
possible election scenario look like then, Brian, going
yeah,
forward here?
so it looks like we could go as early as this coming Sunday.
Crazy.
And I've reported that a couple of times that they could call the election this Sunday, with voting day being April 22nd,
Yeah.
which is a Tuesday. Normally elections are held on Monday, but Easter Monday is considered a stat holiday by the federal government. And so even if many of us don't get the day off, it is for bureaucrats, so you can't have the federal election on that day. So it would be the 22nd. Now, that was some original discussion that was happening in Ottawa, but the Liberals do not have enough candidates nominated yet. And so one of the things being discussed is, okay, do they move it off a few days or another week? Definitely by March 23rd, I expect an election to be called, and then voting day being either April 28th, if they go for a very short campaign, or May 5th, if they try and go a bit longer, again, because they don't have the candidates nominated. The Conservatives are at 280 candidates. We're expanding the field to 343 federal seats in this election, up from 338. But the Liberals are well below 200. So they've got a lot of work to do on that. They may need a little bit of extra time. But one thing I don't expect them to do is to allow the House of Commons to resume on March 24th as is scheduled. Uh, there's talk of, will Jagmeet Singh and the NDP just back them and go into another coalition? NDP sources tell me, no, that's not going to happen. If the government showed up and said, we want to pass certain measures to support workers impacted by the tariffs, the NDP would do that on a very short term, issue by issue basis, but no blank check like they had before. Even the Conservatives may back the government on that sort of thing. Doesn't look like that's where the Liberals are at. But right now, I've got to tell you, Jeanette, everything is fluid. So I'm telling you this as the best information I have at the moment, but check back in a couple of hours, things may
Exactly.
change. Yeah,
Exactly.
Truth Social may have something else from Donald Trump, and everything could change all over again.
Isn't that the truth? Things seem to be moving a mile or 100 miles a minute these days. But unfortunately, we're out of time because we have so much more to talk about here. But we'll just have to have you back next week, Brian. But great to have you with us again.
Thank you.